My wife started using feminist actions against me, so I left her and found myself. Hello, Reddit. My name is Eldon, and I'm 31 years old. I can still vividly recall the exact moment those fateful words left my wife Marjorie's lips, not tonight or any night. The finality in her voice sent a chill through my body. We had been married for 6 years at that point. Things hadn't been perfect lately, but I never anticipated something so absolute and final regarding our intimate life together. Let me provide some background about myself. I work as a sales director at a medium-sized tech company in the Boston area. It's nothing too extravagant, but it pays well, and I've been steadily climbing the corporate ladder for the past 8 years. I genuinely enjoy what I do and have built a respectable career. Marjorie and I met during our junior year of college. She was studying psychology while I was pursuing business administration. We clicked right away, both ambitious but down-to-earth individuals who seemed to want the same things in life. We dated for 3 years before tying the knot in a modest wedding ceremony with about 80 guests, mostly family and close friends. After graduation, Marjorie became a corporate trainer and was making good money. Together, we bought a nice 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb about 4 years ago. We didn't have any kids yet, as we were both focused on establishing our careers before starting a family. I always thought we had a good thing going. We both contributed equally to the household, took 2 vacations every year, usually 1 beach trip and 1 visiting family, and had a decent group of friends, other couples around our age. It was a pretty normal life, nothing extraordinary but stable and comfortable. At least, that's what I thought. That evening started like any other normal day. I came home exhausted after a 10-hour shift dealing with a particularly difficult client. My presentation had flopped, and all I wanted was to see Marjorie, maybe order some Chinese food, and watch something mindless on Netflix, just normal couple stuff to unwind. The moment I walked in, though, I could tell something was off. Marjorie was sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone with an unusual intensity. We had dinner while talking about mundane things, her coworkers' drama, my project deadline, just the usual everyday topics. After we finished eating, we moved to the living room, where she continued scrolling through her phone, probably on one of those feminist Instagram accounts she'd become increasingly obsessed with lately. I was trying to watch some documentary on TV when I leaned over to kiss her neck, something that used to make her smile. She pulled away sharply, as if I'd tried to stab her. "Don't," she said, not even looking up from her screen. "I'm not in the mood." "You haven't been in the mood for weeks now," I replied, trying hard not to sound as frustrated as I felt. "Is everything okay?" That's when she put down her phone and looked me straight in the eyes with a cold expression I had never seen before. Then she delivered those crushing words, "Not tonight or any night." My mind raced through a million possible responses, but I just sat there like an idiot, my mouth probably hanging open. How do you even reply to someone suddenly ending physical intimacy in a marriage? There was no explanation, no room for discussion, just a one-sided decision affecting us both. "What exactly do you mean?" I finally managed to ask, hoping that I had somehow misunderstood. "Exactly what I said," she continued, her voice weirdly calm, like she was explaining something to a child. "I'm comfortable with our life together, the house, our social circle, the stability, but I'm no longer interested in physical intimacy with you or any man. I've been reading a lot about how women are conditioned to provide physical affection to men, and I've decided I'm not participating in that patriarchal expectation anymore. You can accept it or not, that's your choice." I was completely blindsided. She'd been getting deeper into radical feminist content online recently, but I never thought it would affect our relationship so fundamentally. "So you're just unilaterally deciding that our marriage doesn't include physical intimacy anymore, without any discussion?" I asked, trying desperately to understand what was happening. "I don't need your permission to set boundaries with my own body," she replied, her tone taking on that familiar edge I'd come to recognize whenever she was quoting something from her online groups. "The fact that you think this requires a discussion just shows how entitled men are to women's bodies." I sat back, completely stunned by her response. "Marjorie, this isn't about entitlement," I said. "This is about our relationship, about connection and intimacy between partners who supposedly love each other." "Love doesn't mean I have to perform physical acts I no longer want to participate in," she countered immediately. "When did this change? When did you stop wanting to be with me that way?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Just 2 months ago, things had seemed normal between us." She just shrugged. "It's been building for a while. I've just finally found the courage to vocalize it instead of performing for your benefit." That night, I slept on the couch, not because she asked me to, but because I couldn't bear to lie next to someone who had just shattered my understanding of our relationship so completely. The next few days were weird as hell. We were still living together, still eating meals together, even watching TV together, but now there was this invisible wall between us. She acted like her declaration was completely ordinary, as if she'd simply announced she wanted to change grocery stores, not completely reshape the foundation of our marriage. 3 days after her announcement, I tried bringing up counseling over breakfast. I found a couples therapist with good reviews and thought it might help us navigate this sudden change. I think we should talk to someone about what's going on between us, I suggested carefully. We don't need therapy, she responded dismissively, rolling her eyes like I was an idiot for even suggesting it. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm not going to be pressured into physical intimacy I don't want just because society expects it. Maybe you should get therapy for your dependency on female validation. Jesus Christ. Of course, she was right about not being pressured. I would never do that, but her complete unwillingness to even talk about this sudden change left me feeling like I was living with a stranger wearing my wife's face. Everything I said was twisted to make me sound like some kind of oppressor. At night, lying on my side of our now purely functional bed, I had moved back from the couch, determined not to be displaced in my own home. I would stare at the ceiling, wondering how I missed it, the gradual breakdown of our connection. Had I been so absorbed in work that I failed to notice her pulling away? Or had she hidden her feelings until reaching some breaking point I never saw coming? I reviewed our recent history, looking for signs. Sure, our sex life had slowed down over the past. Sure, our physical relationship had slowed down over the past year, but I thought that was normal for a couple married over 6 years, both working full-time jobs. We still had date nights. We still held hands in public. We still said I love you every night before bed, at least until recently. Nothing about it ever felt final, until now. One thing became clear, painfully fast: I was now in a marriage where I was neither wanted nor needed in any real or personal way. I was just convenient. A contributor to bills. A presence at family gatherings. A placeholder. And, increasingly, a symbol of what she was supposedly pushing back against. To her new circle of online friends, I was just another clueless husband who didn't get it. I tried again to have an honest conversation, this time on a quiet Saturday morning while we were both at home. Marjorie, I'm trying to respect your feelings, but I need to understand. Did I do something wrong? Is there something I could change? She sighed and shook her head as if I just asked her to solve a math equation for the 100th time. This is exactly the problem, she said. Men think everything is about them. This is about me. My journey. My identity. And the fact that you're making this about what you did wrong just proves how conditioned you are. But we're married, I said gently, trying to stay calm. Your decisions affect me too. So what? She snapped. You think that entitles you to make decisions about my body? That's not how autonomy works, Eldon. This is why people are waking up. Men think partnership means ownership. I stood there in silence, stunned again by how quickly any attempt to understand was flipped back on me. This isn't about ownership, I said quietly. This is about connection, about sharing something, about closeness. You didn't just end a routine, you cut off one of the core ways we expressed care. That affects me, too. Marjorie didn't respond. She walked off to the bedroom and closed the door. It was then I realized that we were no longer partners. We were co-inhabitants. Living parallel lives, under the same roof, but nowhere near the same page. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. During this time, I found myself sitting in my car after work, parked in front of our house, not wanting to go inside. I didn't know what version of her I'd find that day, apathetic, combative, or worse, dismissively indifferent. I felt like a ghost inside my own life. One evening, sitting in the driveway with the engine running, it hit me: I had to make a choice. I could keep clinging to something that no longer resembled a marriage, hoping she might one day turn around and remember what we were, or I could begin investing my time, energy, and emotion into something that might grow again. Even if that something was just myself. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30 a.m. It was the first intentional change I'd made in a long time, something just for me. I started small: stretching, a little meditation, a cup of tea instead of my usual rushed coffee. 20 quiet minutes with no phone, no laptop, and most importantly, no Marjorie. That hour became mine. And it became sacred. Eventually, I added short jogs around the neighborhood. Nothing intense, just enough to get my heart rate up and clear my head. After a week or so, I joined a local gym. It wasn't far from my office, and soon I was going every day after work, using that hour as a buffer between my demanding job and my now emotionally vacant home life. The physical transformation was gradual, but meaningful. My shoulders filled out. My posture improved. I stopped dragging my feet. But more importantly, something inside me was changing. I felt more present. More grounded. More like the version of myself I hadn't seen in years. "You're up early," Marjorie commented one morning, walking into the kitchen and seeing me dressed, showered, and reading a book at the table. "Just trying something new," I replied with a polite smile. She didn't respond. She just poured her coffee and scrolled through her phone in silence. By the third week, I started dressing better, too. Not for anyone. Not because of her. But because I finally felt better. I invested in better fitting shirts, nicer shoes, and even bought a new watch, something I'd wanted for years but never prioritized. That same week, I reconnected with an old friend, Clark, who I hadn't seen since college. We met up for lunch downtown. "You look different, man," he said as we caught up. Like, in a good way. More awake. I told him a little about what was going on at home, carefully, without badmouthing Marjorie. Clark just nodded knowingly. "You're not the only one, you know. I have 3 buddies going through stuff like this. Wives suddenly not interested, shutting down emotionally, saying it's not them, it's society or whatever. You ask a question, and somehow you're the bad guy." His words stuck with me for days. Back at home, Marjorie was as detached as ever. She didn't ask where I'd been or who I saw. But I caught her glancing at me a few times, at my clothes, at my face, even my phone screen. She never asked questions, but the shift in her attention was noticeable. I didn't mention anything. I just kept going. With the energy and clarity I gained, I finally revisited an old passion of mine, photography. I bought a modest DSLR and began going on weekend hikes in the nearby state park to capture early morning landscapes. It felt like breathing fresh air for the first time in years. And when I was behind that camera, I wasn't thinking about her. Or about the rejection. Or the empty house. I was thinking about composition, light, timing, things that made me feel alive again. Soon, I was uploading photos to a portfolio site and even started selling a few prints. Nothing huge. But the fact that strangers were willing to pay for something I created? That was everything. It wasn't just a hobby anymore, it was proof. Proof that I had something to offer the world outside of being someone's husband. Outside of being a steady paycheck or a support beam for someone else's identity shift. The more I rediscovered who I was, the more I realized how much I'd sacrificed to keep our marriage afloat. And the sad truth was, I'd been doing all the paddling while she sat comfortably in the back, complaining about the boat. Around this time, something in Marjorie shifted, not drastically, but just enough to be noticeable. It started with small gestures. She made dinner one evening, something she hadn't done in months. Another night, she suggested watching a show together. Her commentary, usually laced with passive critiques or ideological undertones, was quieter, almost absent. I said nothing. I simply observed. She was paying attention again, probably not because of some newfound clarity, but because she sensed I was slipping from her grasp. The more independent I became, the more interested she seemed. But I wasn't fooled. I knew the difference between genuine care and calculated reinvestment. At work, my renewed focus was paying off too. I took on a high-visibility project and delivered results that exceeded expectations. My supervisor, Ronald, pulled me aside after a presentation. "Eldon, I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but keep doing it. You're sharp, collected, our clients have noticed." That affirmation felt better than anything I'd heard at home in a long time. I started traveling for work again, short conferences, client meetings, even a few overnight stays. These trips had once been a rarity in our relationship, something I avoided to spend more time at home. Now, I welcomed them. Hotel rooms gave me space to breathe. Conversations with colleagues reminded me that I was more than a placeholder or a symbol. It was during one of these work trips, at a regional summit in Asheville, that I met Harriet. She wasn't what you might expect. Not flashy or overly flirtatious. She was kind, observant, a bit reserved. She worked in strategic accounts for one of our partner companies and had only recently moved to the Southeast. We were seated next to each other during a panel discussion on team management, and afterward, we struck up conversation over coffee. We talked about books, about the landscapes in her home state, about photography. She asked questions with real interest and gave space for thoughtful answers. It wasn't flirtation. It was something deeper, curiosity, mutual respect. Later that evening, as several of us from the summit gathered for dinner, I found myself seated next to her again. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was speaking to someone who saw me not as a projection, not as a metaphor, but as a man. A person. I didn't act on anything. I wouldn't, not while still married. But that night, lying in my hotel room, I came to a realization that felt more liberating than anything I had experienced since that fateful evening on the couch. I didn't need Marjorie to change anymore. I didn't need her to understand or apologize or find her way back to who she used to be. I was no longer waiting. I wasn't surviving, I was living. And that changed everything. When I returned home, Marjorie asked about the trip. Her voice carried something I hadn't heard in a while, curiosity, and maybe even concern. It was productive, I replied simply, placing my bag by the door. I saw the photos you posted, she said, stirring a pot on the stove. Pretty place. Who's the woman in the last picture? I had forgotten Harriet had ended up in a group photo. The question was casual, but her eyes weren't. She's from a partner company, I said, matter of fact. We shared a panel session. She seems close, Marjorie said, not meeting my gaze. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Over the next few weeks, Marjorie's behavior shifted again. She initiated conversations more frequently. She sat next to me during meals. She even suggested we take a weekend trip together, something we hadn't done in almost a year. But it was too late. I had already contacted a lawyer and quietly begun preparing for separation. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't vindictive. I was simply done. I'd built a financial cushion in a separate account and gathered the necessary documents. My attorney had advised me on what steps to take and how to protect myself. One evening, I returned from the gym to find Marjorie waiting in the living room. She had that look, the one she used when trying to reclaim her footing. Eldon, she began, I've been thinking a lot lately. About us. I sat down calmly, keeping my expression neutral. I know things haven't been right. I wasn't fair to you. I got swept up in ideas that made me cold. I didn't think about how it affected you. I let her talk. She mentioned the things she missed, our long walks, our shared jokes, even our movie nights. She suggested we go to counseling. She even hinted, without saying it directly, that perhaps she'd reconsider her stance on intimacy. I just miss what we had, she said softly. I nodded. I understand. And, she asked. I think it's good that you're reflecting. But I'm not interested in rebuilding this. I've already started the process to move forward separately. Her face fell. You're divorcing me? I am. She stared at me in disbelief. But I'm trying. I'm willing to do the work now. I gave a quiet smile, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Now that your stability is threatened. Now that you sense you're no longer the center of my life. That's not love, Marjorie. That's fear. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. You ended the partnership long ago, I continued. I just took longer to realize it. But I've caught up now. She stood up abruptly and walked out of the room. The following days were quiet. Marjorie didn't bring up the conversation again. She moved through the house like someone trying to turn back time without making a sound, as if silence might erase the decisions and words that brought us here. But I didn't waver. With my attorney's guidance, I formalized the filing. I had made sure all documentation was in order, the financial records, the email thread where she had written clearly that she no longer considered physical connection a necessary part of our relationship, and the journal entries I'd kept over the past several months outlining our decline. Everything I needed to protect myself legally was in place. When I handed her the envelope containing the divorce paperwork, she didn't say anything at first. She just sat with it in her lap, staring at the name printed on the corner of the law firm's letterhead. You really meant it, she whispered. I do. What if I changed my mind about everything, she asked. I think you're confusing regret with understanding, I said gently. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't move to comfort her. That was someone else's role now, hers, maybe, for herself. Not mine. I was wrong, she said. I thought I was being empowered, but really I was pushing you away, and now, I'm losing you. You already did, I replied quietly. You just didn't notice until I started rebuilding. The next week was a blur of logistics. She stayed in the house while she made arrangements. I moved into a small apartment nearby, nothing fancy, but peaceful, mine. I brought only what I needed, my clothes, my camera gear, some books, and the ceramic mug I always used for morning tea. In the weeks that followed, I focused on work, on the gym, on my photography. I sold several more prints online. One of my landscape shots, a sunrise through the fog over the Appalachian Trail, got picked up by a small travel magazine. They paid me modestly, but it wasn't about the money. It was about the sense that my voice, my vision, was finally being seen and valued again. Harriet and I kept in touch after the summit. We emailed occasionally, shared photos, notes about good trails, and a few short video messages. She didn't pry into my personal life, and I didn't overshare. It wasn't a romantic pursuit. It was connection. Natural. Earned. But more than anyone, I leaned on myself. Because that was the lesson all of this had taught me. I had given so much of myself away in service to a relationship that no longer reciprocated. I had twisted myself into knots trying to understand someone who wasn't even speaking the same language anymore. And once I finally stopped waiting for validation or permission to be whole again, that's exactly when I became whole. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I hosted my first solo photo exhibit in a local gallery. Dozens of people came. I stood beside my work as strangers admired the contrast in light and shadow, the tension in fog and form. Each piece was a fragment of the journey I had taken alone, but not lonely. In one corner, framed in clean oak, hung the image I'd taken the morning after that pivotal hike on the summit, the one where Harriet and I stood side by side, the sun cutting through the horizon like a beginning. That picture sold first. Marjorie never attended the exhibit. I didn't expect her to. I heard she had moved to stay with her cousin in upstate New York while figuring out her next steps. Mutual friends told me she was quiet these days, more guarded. I felt no anger toward her, only clarity. I didn't wish her ill. I simply didn't wish to carry her story with me anymore. Some months later, I received an email from her. It was short. No subject line. I hope you're well. I still think about what I said that night. I'm sorry it took losing everything to understand what I really had. I didn't respond. Not out of bitterness, but because nothing more needed to be said. I had forgiven her long ago. My life now is not defined by rejection or resentment. It's defined by what came after: peace, direction, rediscovery. The joy of making something. Of being something. Not for someone else, but for myself. To anyone reading this, wondering whether they're stuck forever in the cold space of someone else's detachment, hear this: you have choices. You don't have to wait for the tide to change. You can plant your feet and build a lighthouse of your own. I was once just like you, lost, quiet, confused. And now, I wake up with the sun, brew tea in that same old mug, sling my camera over my shoulder, and walk toward whatever beauty the world has waiting. Not looking back. Not anymore. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.